in 53 seconds.
Got it. Greetings, SACOG Lunar Committee. David Schwegel, shining the light on high-speed rail, transit-oriented development, and what this means for our region. High-speed rail is in a world of hurt right now. Let's face it, $7 billion shortfall, $4 billion federal clawback, FBI investigation, no future federal funding, all because the consultants failed to tell the High-Speed Rail Authority that they needed to acquire all of the right-of-way first before they can proceed with design build work. That costs the state of California $7 billion. So I am working aggressively with all 121 members of the legislature to get the business licenses of those consultants who overrun the budget revoked so they can no longer do any more damage to the state of California. Let's talk about the rail yards. Back in 2009, the New York Times deemed the rail yards the nation's largest urban infill project. It is 16 years later. 15 of the 16 years, it has been the emperor without any clothes. Finally, we're seeing some traction, but I'm confused about Kaiser Hospital. Why on earth, when they find out their Morse Avenue facility does not meet seismic codes, why didn't they immediately cut through a whole bunch of red tape and start building their hospital then? Darrell Steinberg says, instead of focusing on the high-speed rail project statewide, let's shine the light on the Capital Corridor. What we need to determine, let's suppose that Amtrak is successful getting 150-mile-per-hour service between Sacramento and San Francisco in about 45 minutes via a new Transbay tube. Does that mean that a whole bunch of businesses in San Francisco will gravitate up to our region? Or does it mean that a whole bunch of people in San Francisco who own cardboard boxes are going to ditch their cardboard boxes for palaces in this region? The MTP SCS from a few years back really underscores the importance of making sure that if high-speed rail is implemented, that it does not generate bedroom communities. And 120,000 people commuting out of this region every day for work is bad enough. We don't want to become any more of a bedroom community than it already is. Why not? Take a look at Stockton, take a look at New Jersey. Let's double down on transit-oriented development, and the single most competitive investment we can make is to get the rail yards up and running full speed ahead, specifically looking at Crystal City, Virginia as a model. They beat out 237 other municipalities to land Amazon HQ 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Clerk, are there any other requests to speak?
There's no other public comment.
Okay, fantastic. So that takes us to our last bit of housekeeping before the main agenda. It's an opportunity for members of the board to disclose any conflicts of interest that they feel they may have with any of the items on the agenda. Any to comment on? All right, moving on. We'll now take up the consent calendar. Clerk, is there anyone from the public who wishes to remove an item for public comment? And otherwise, is there a motion or a second to approve the consent calendar?
Bradford will move to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
No
all
public
those
comment
in
on this
favor? I'm assuming there's no public comment
No
on
public
the
comment.
agenda approval from last time. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, that takes us to item number 2, which is the Green Means Go planning category contract reassignment Bowman sewer study.
All right, I'm Greg Chu on the planning staff. This item is regarding SACOG's Green Means Go program. We gave about $30 million in competitive grants to local agencies such as yours. And one of those that went to Placer County for the Highway 49 in Auburn Bowman area, they received $468,000. They were going to do some technical analysis for potential infill opportunities, and then they were going to complete that with complete it with the complete environmental process to finish that out. What happened was they did the technical studies. They spent about a third of the money, and then for the remaining 2/3, they changed kind of how they are. Instead of adopting specific plans, now they're just adopting it through general plans. So they decided not to go ahead with what they originally said they were going to do, which was to adopt the environmental process to go through that. And instead, on the 15th of this month, the Board of Supervisors at Placer County is expected to forfeit the remaining $300,000+ of that. It just so happens the city of Auburn is very interested in infill in the Bowman area, which is one of the two study areas. And they asked, since the money was originally intended to do some sewer analysis and some other things, that was what Placer County was doing, is if the city of Auburn could take the money and do exactly that, to do the sewer analysis for the Bowman area. So the staff is recommending that happens. It's consistent with what the program is. It's for the same geographic area, and it would come ultimately would result in the same outcome. So the recommendation from staff to the committee to bring to the board is to follow through on that request from the city of Auburn.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Any directors have questions? Is there any public comment? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm deaf in my right ear, so
I
you
know,
gotta
I'm
speak
sorry.
loudly if you want my attention, and I can't see you.
Thank you, Greg. Did you say that the city of Auburn got the grant in the beginning and now the city of Auburn is just taking it to a different place, or is it the unincorporated area of Auburn?
It's the unincorporated area of, so it's Placer County that received the grant originally.
Okay,
And then they're gonna,
okay, thank
we
you.
would transfer it.
Got it.
Any other questions? Excellent. Any public comment?
There's no public comment.
All right, fantastic. Is there a motion? A motion by Villegas, any second?
I'll second.
Second by Clark Kretz. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Just want to make a little note. So I've been working here at SACOG for 21 years. This will be my last month, and this will be my last committee meeting.
What?
Yeah. Just want to appreciate all that the committee has done for the agency, and it's been a pleasure working with your agents, with your organizations, and we will have a board meeting item on my future. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for all your time. Excellent.
Thank you. If I may, Greg, thank you so much from the town of Loomis. You've, always been so helpful to us, and I'm a huge fan of yours. Are you going to retire, or where are you going?
Yeah, how are you gonna pass up the committee with the greatest acronym ever, too?
Yeah, I don't have any plans to necessarily work again, but I'm certainly open to the idea. I really enjoy it. Let's just say that. I really miss what's going on in your communities and seeing what's happening. So I'm leaving the door open.
Great. Let's get your phone number later.
Okay. The city already has it.
All right. We're now on to item number 3, which is from plan to action implementing the 2025 blueprint, and Clint Holtzen is going to present this.
I will be pretty brief because we started this conversation last month. Just wanted to do a couple of quick refreshers. Again, these are just a couple of the just kind of questions to have in mind as you're listening today and providing input on the draft policies that went out in your packet. As a reminder, these are written as regional policies. They kind of reflect the fact that this is not a regulatory document. So you're going to see words much more like encourage and prioritize. But so there's not a lot of shalls in this. It's a lot of shoulds and how can we help. SACOG absolutely has to lean in on all of these policies, but we can't deliver them alone. So they are written such that they should be of use to your local agencies, implemented by local actions. These speak kind of in the language of federal and state policy priorities. So it's really helpful to reference these when you're going after federal and state grants. These are really intended to be policies for the region. But of course, this is not a regulatory document, so they don't supersede your general plan, any of your local policies or authorities. These policies are all rooted in this plan that the board moved along with this triple bottom line framework. That was one of the first actions the board took on this plan, is to set this overarching policy framework of advancing equity, economy, and the environment through the blueprint strategies. We took additional time to do a lot of outreach, and these are the themes that came out of all of that outreach to over 6,000 residents in the region. Housing options and housing affordability were the #1 concern for residents, followed by safety, I think natural disaster response, preparedness, and traffic congestion, kind of rounding out the top four. The policies are all organized into our strategic priorities. So these emerged out of the 2020 plan. And this is a living document. So each plan kind of builds on and refines the policy commitments of the previous plan. These also became the strategic priorities for SACOG's strategic plan, which the board adopted in 2022. And then I won't get into kind of all of the details that we went through last month on all of those strategic priority areas, but we did have a question last month that we thought would be good to bring context to this conversation and about one of those areas, which is modernizing the way that we pay for transportation in California. And a question we had last month was, what would that actually take if we switched from the gas tax of today to a mileage-based user fee? What would it take to actually cover all of our needs? So just at the end of February, the state came out with the, I think it's the SB or AB 1121 report, and that looks at needs across the entire state, both to maintain our system, but it also looks at the collection of all of the regional plans from around the state. And what do they say needs are? Statewide over the next 10 years, it's about $760 billion when you add up all of that maintenance need and all of that capital need and the transit operating costs across all of the regional plans. Revenues, when you remove or when you look at just the stuff that is not coming from the gas tax, so that's local funding coming out of developer impact fees, it's our sales taxes, federal funds, federal grants that come to California. We'll take care of about 387 billion of that, leaving 371 billion for California's currently fuel tax. But if they make that transition to a mileage-based fee, this would be the amount needed. Roughly about $37 billion a year. We have $318 billion in billion miles traveled in the region, so about 11.6 cents. Today, the cost is the equivalent cost on the fuel tax. When you look at just average fuel economy, is about 2.8 cents, 3 cents per mile. So if you wanted to cover all of this, 11.6 cents, but of course, we love caveats. The state is looking at doing a revenue neutral transition, similar to the way that the gas tax swap worked way back. That is an option that's easier to move through the legislature. So they would look to supplant the fuel tax and stabilize it rather than increase it, stabilize it and peg it to inflation, such that we're kind of stopping the hemorrhaging, but we're not making a lot more headway. The other thing is these are needs across just 10 years. So the cost would be very high in those 10 years. Once you get past that, of course, if you're on the maintenance side, you're back into best practices, which are significantly cheaper than the hole that we've dug ourselves into, needing a lot of reconstruction and rehab. And so other options would be you set this cost something much less than that, or even revenue neutral. Then there's the option of you could bond or you could finance against future revenues to bring funding into maintenance earlier. This is something like what we've seen in Yuba County with a loan from the Yuba Water Agency that addressed a lot of road needs, and then that gets paid back out of their SB1 funding over time. So there's options like that, financing options. Another part that is critical in our plan is that as you move from a fuel-based system to a usage-based system, similar to the way that we pay for utilities, you could use that for demand management as well. So does it make sense that you might pay higher costs during the peak periods because there's a lot of demand on the roadway, but then those costs come down, or that mileage cost comes down in the off peaks? Or would it make sense that on a rural road that just doesn't have as much volume, maybe it doesn't cost as much on that road as it does on I-5 coming into downtown Sacramento during the middle of the day? So there are many reasons that you may not go all the way to the 11.6 cents, but it's still helpful context just to know, like, what's the order of magnitude we'd be talking about if we wanted to cover all of our needs. So wanted to just kind of revisit that question because I think it is very useful context.
So Clint,
Yes.
if I can just make sure I understand one part of this. So when you were, sort of laying this math problem out, you set aside all the other ways that road maintenance and construction are paid for. The reality is that if you converted entirely, you'd need 23 cents.
If you got rid of the sales
So about
taxes,
half
the
of it is
federal,
paid from other
the federal gas tax.
So
which
everybody's
is
paying
bailed
that
out.
already also, right? And the gas tax.
Yeah. And then really quick, before I just jump to getting some input or questions on the policies that we sent out, next month, we'll come back to you with a draft plan to consider releasing for 2 months worth of public review. And then we would hope to come back to you with what we heard through that public review, any changes we're planning to make to the document and the EIR in September, October timeframe, putting us on track to hopefully adopt by the end of the year. We're currently on schedule to adopt in November. And then here are those questions again, but I will stop the presentation there and see if there's any input on the policies that we've got or questions about where we're heading from here.
Okay. Directors, any questions? Mr. Hume.
Not related to the gas tax, but just in general, I know that this update outlasts the current federal administration. But I also know there's a lot of uncertainty about what the federal priorities will be. Are we modifying our stance or our language or anything in this document to make sure that it is aligned more with some of the rumblings?
That we're looking into what we might need to change now. So we've had in the past, just to give an example that's sitting at the top of my head, in the past, the federal government's required an environmental justice analysis as part of these plans. That executive order, that was an executive order that no longer exists now, that was repealed. And so what we're looking at is we may not have the same environmental justice analysis that we've had in the past, but the approach that we've taken in our region is to use mobility zones as an example, is to not necessarily look at just one set of indicators to decide this is an environmental justice area, but it's much more context sensitive to different places are going to have different inequities based in a whole series of different variables. It could be income, it could be race, but it could also be geography. There's many other factors that go into that. So we're looking at changing our analysis or emphasizing in our analysis more of that intersectionality thing than just a pure environmental justice analysis. So we are looking to kind of change things, make sure we're still absolutely in alignment with the federal requirements and priority areas, but there's some language that might need to change because changes in federal law.
And so then recognizing that to some extent it is a bit of wordplay with the same desired outcomes, but nonetheless, we are cognizant and we're trying to adjust so that when this plan hits the street, it isn't rejected outright in the near term.
Yeah, we are. We are. And I think that'll also go through a good stress test during this public review period where we will have our federal partners and state partners reviewing as well.
Good. So thank you.
Through the chair, delving a little deeper into that rabbit hole, it seems to me that in some areas, we now have a situation where federal policy and the words they're looking for are in complete opposition to state policy and the words that the state is looking for. Are we finding that that's a challenge as well? Like how to keep both entities happy as we develop this plan and or risk one or both of them not approving it?
So Caltrans will do the review and they have the delegated authority to approve the plan for us. We will I think we'll know the answer. I'll have more to share with that when we start hearing back from the federal regulators that we'll review during the draft period. There are terms like the federal term of affirmatively furthering fair housing. That was federal term, but it is also now part of state law. And it is a requirement that we have to consider that in our plan. We would have been considering how to bring housing into high opportunity areas that give people chances anyways, but we do want to be careful about how we're using those terms to make sure that it's clear this is a state law, even if it used to be a federal law. But I think that's all going to go through a stress test here during our review period. But we have been trying to pay very close attention to what's coming out of the federal government to make sure we're addressing those as best we can going into this draft.
Okay, thank you.
Director Villegas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So, so in a perfect world where we wanted to sort of reverse engineer this whole thing and we identified all the priorities and we figured out what it was going to cost and we just sort of backed into it, that would be ideal. But we're as evident by what you presented, we're very far from that. In fact, we're almost sort of solidifying the fact that we're going to be very far from achieving our policy objectives in the transportation world relative to what the state is looking at, and that is the revenue neutrality pathway, right? So one for the other. My question is, given the timeline, the adoption of the EIR in the blueprint, how does it align with the state's ultimate decision on what that final decision will be in terms of landing on a revenue neutral, assuming that's what it is, financing mechanism? And when will we know, and how important will that be for us to sort of begin to implement or realize our hopes and aspirations as it relates to the region?
So we will go through another plan update in 2027. We have to, because of our extension, this plan, we have to update again in 2 years from now. We'll go through that and we'll be deep into a 2031 update, most likely before the state makes that full transition. I think they're not making that transition within the next 5 years, and our plan does not assume that they will make that transition before 2030. This is more of a post 2030, pre 2035 solution. We'll go through one more update, be most of the way through a second update before they get there. So we'll have some time to adjust, but our plan is absolutely dependent on the state making action to approve this.
And-
We are assuming the state will stabilize those revenue sources that
see.
come to our region.
Okay.
We're seeing a decline through 2030, and we're assuming that decline will be reversed in the 2030s and go through 2050.
Okay, very helpful. That was gonna be my second question. You just answered it.
That
So
was, that was why I asked the original question about if we made a transition and should we actually, through our policies, anticipate it and maybe volunteer to be the guinea pigs in order to be the change we want, you know?
Yeah, so thank you, because you teed it up and then you almost answered it before I even asked it, and that is, so the state is intending to backfill that so that we aren't left hanging. I mean, we know their revenues are declining, they have been for many years. So, but there's an intention to continue to backfill. Okay. Yeah. Super helpful. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? Excellent. Is there anybody from the public that would like to
There's
comment?
no public comment.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, that one was just a presentation, so no actions necessary, which takes us on to our last agenda item, which is item number 4. That one is the US 50 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan Policy Framework Input. I'm sure there's an acronym there. I'm just not seeing
Sure.
it.
Yes, sir.
And Dustin Foster from our staff is going to make a presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Love the
Welcome.
intro. Yes, my name is Dustin Foster. Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, directors. Dustin Foster. I'm on the transportation team here at SACOG. I'm also the project manager of the US 50 CMCP. We call them CMCPs.
Very good.
This plan is in partnership with Caltrans District 3. So I'm working very closely with Denira Soto at District 3, who has a lot of experience doing these previously. This work is tied to, it's good to follow the blueprint, right? We're implementing the blueprint through this, but also really tied to our region's grant strategy. We want to help all of our local agencies, improve their success at winning state grants, particularly the SB1 program, Solutions for Congested Corridors program, or SCCP. So today, this is a follow-up. We presented an overview last month to the Transportation Committee. We decided it would make a lot of sense to also present and receive input on this plan from the Lunar Committee, because several of you, I see it in front of me, are also within that corridor planning area. So we want to have you really provide your input on this framework. That is included in attachment A here. We'll be going over that quite a bit today. And we'll be focusing on the vision, the goals, and the strategies for the corridor plan. So, we'll put this in 2 parts, this presentation. I'll provide a background and some inputs to the policy framework, and then really want to reserve the bulk of the presentation for that second part, where we get committee input on the proposed policy framework. So you might be asking, what are CMCPs and why are we doing? So this is a CTC, CTC and Caltrans guided planning process. It was in statute required to complete a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan to be eligible for the SB1 Solutions for Congested Corridors program. But it also entails a lot of long-range planning and modeling, looking at all the key important performance metrics along the corridor, as well as all the options, right? It's the 50 corridor, but it's not just the 50, right? We're looking at the Gold Line. We're looking at the American River Parkway. We're looking at the local system as well. Here's a chart for all the CMCPs that have been completed or in progress in the region. As you see there, Caltrans is currently leading State Route 99 with the two districts to the south of us. And SACOG is leading our first, this is our first that we're leading, and it'll be the first approved by the board. So very exciting to have you all guide the process.
Can I ask the most important question?
Sure.
Is a conveniently placed limited access expressway immediately to the south of Highway 50 considered in this corridor study?
Let's look at the solutions area in a few slides. So here's the general process. We have a consultant team led by Jacobs supporting the process. So they kind of break up the process at 4 key phases. We are still in that first key phase where we're defining corridor characteristics. With the finalization of the policy framework, we'll be moving into those successive phases. If you want to see kind of the discrete tasks, that is attachment B in your packet. And at the bottom there, the partner engagement, very important in this plan. We have a technical advisory committee, which is apprised of all of the local agencies along the corridor. So your staff are working on this plan, but also the transit agencies, some key nonprofits like the 50 TMA, SABA. And so those groups are listed in attachment C. So we talk about policy alignment. We're trying to find that key spot in the middle of the Venn diagram there. It's kind of a tightrope right now. And I think actually those questions in the last presentation really help kind of show that, right? That the federal government, the state government, might have some key different performance measures that they're looking at. So at the state level, as we're doing these CMCPs, we need to take into account how Caltrans, the performance measures that they utilize to analyze projects, that's the CSIS there, but also the equity and climate priorities in CAPTI at the top and around reducing VMT. We also need to utilize the blueprint as our kind of our backstop here for all the transportation project assumptions and land use assumptions, but also the policies. So we really want to align with that. We also need to identify, local planning projects, local needs, all the work that's happening at your agencies. And again, really aligning with those funding criteria for the funding program. So all that is really detailed quite a bit in, again, the policy framework. So these inputs for the policy framework, we have an existing conditions memo looking at a lot of key information along the corridor. That's finalized. We have public engagement that includes some pop-ups throughout the region, some virtual community workshops, an online survey that we just closed earlier this week, but also the partner engagement at the TAC, and then really wanting to get input from TC, but also you all before we finalize that policy framework. Okay, so answer your question, Director Kozlowski, right? So here is the solutions area in pink. We had several iterations of looking at this area between the consultant team, Caltrans District 3, and our technical advisory committee. So through the process of developing this area with that group, we had several meetings with City of Rancho Cordova, City of Folsom, connector staff. So, you see some of the limits to the south there were extended. The one key caveat here is we're utilizing the Blueprint Transportation project list as our key kind of baseline for those projects. So key phases of any project, would have to be in that plan for initial baseline. There are a couple other comments to help shape other parts of the the corridor, but I think that's the key one that you're asking about, Director. And so if you're in that area, your project can be considered. However, we're really aligning with the performance measures, and we'll be finding those projects to prioritize to be competitive for the state, right? So, so those are two different things. And
So you're
the link-
selectively excluding it is what you're doing.
I'm sorry?
I-
No.
I'm sorry, I don't want it to become contentious, but this
No,
map is not granular enough to answer my question. And what you've said so far is that if you're in that area, it may be considered, but it needs to be on the project list that's in the blueprint. It's in the project list sort of selectively already, but this doesn't really just answer the question of whether it's part of the comprehensive corridor management plan here, or
Yeah.
whatever CMCP stands for.
Yeah, and what I'll say is what we're really looking at, might have went over it, is, this will be approved next year. It's really lining us up for that next round of solutions for congested corridors in 2026. So really those projects that are going to be competitive, and ready to go at that point, those will be the ones we'll be considering. But that's a few phases down in the process, so.
Okay, it still doesn't answer my question. You've just given criteria. Is the connector project, the limited access expressway that is conveniently parallel to Highway 50, going to be considered in the
Consider.
comprehensive multimodal plan that we're talking about?
Sorry, yeah.
It can't be comprehensive if we ignore that road. So that, I'm just trying to make sure that we're talking about the same thing here. And the map that you've drawn excludes part of it, for sure, if only the area in the pink is what will be considered.
So the full connect.
I'll take a
not
note
part of
that
the-
it's not part of it. I just
Not
need
part
to
of the
understand.
plan, just the
Yeah.
northern segments.
What's it?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, badger you. I'm just saying that I asked a plain question. It can be yes or no, and I'll be satisfied with either answer. I just need to know.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Director. So considered is, correct. Generally, Caltrans has a very tight band around the freeway when they're considering projects and CMCPs. We were able to expand that a bit
Okay.
in working with Caltrans and the TAC.
That's
So
helpful.
that's what you see there.
So what
today.
does that band look like typically?
They're generally 1 to 2 miles. It depends on the CMCP. Every CMCP, we have the guidelines, the authority to decide, but
Perfect. Okay,
thank
I'm
you.
satisfied. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
If I may, I was going to save this for when we discuss a little later in the plan, but I'll go ahead and pile on right now. If we look at under the draft goals and strategies, the fourth bullet point under improving safety is improve emergency preparedness for extreme weather events, e.g. wildfires in El Dorado County, flooding, extreme heat, and other travel disruptions. And so I think whereas this pink band might be looking more at the congestion-related solutions, certainly the roadway that Chair Kozlowski is talking about, and even by extension, Highway 16 in unincorporated Sacramento County, provide emergency evacuation routes for a whole lot of people who live south of 50, upwards of Pollock Pines area, that they might have to, because of a fire or something else, choose to go a direction that does not put them within that neatly drawn pink bandwidth. So I think that sort of accentuates what he's saying, that these neatly defined corridors maybe don't align necessarily with some other goals and strategies that we have elucidated.
Or just the pattern of usage generally by the public.
That too.
Please,
Yeah,
please
thank
press
you.
ahead.
Thank you. So we have a very fun logo, right? So it's there on the left. We've developed some branding materials, really trying to get some online survey responses, really just getting, kind of the public's feedback on the plan at this early stage. We had a lot of social media posts between Caltrans and SACOG, a lot of partners distributing. We had some in-person distribution in Sacramento, but also up at the farmer's market in Placerville. We had noted at an early phase that we hadn't received a lot of responses from that part of the corridor. So we decided to go up there and get some more responses. So attachment D is your interim results from March 21st. We looked at the numbers on the 26th, they were up to 1250, and we closed earlier this week with 1,500 plus responses. So that's very, very exciting. We'll be going through those data and leveraging those insights as we further develop the framework, but also the solutions for the plan. And some initial online survey responses. This question here, what would improve your corridor travel experience? We felt was very important to helping guide and inform the policy framework. And here's sort of the responses that we heard. Reduced travel time certainly was the top response, but we're seeing in a lot of surveys and a lot of partner discussions that safety is really rising to the top there. But you know, you see there are also some really good, more multimodal access related policies and priorities with a more complete bike network, increased transit frequency, better access to transit, and so on and so forth. So there's kind of your top 10. Again, these are interim results, so it might be different in the final, but just good key information at this part of the plan. So we had asked the TAC in February, kind of an early part of the phase of this work to guide the initial policy framework draft. What are your priorities? You know, what are the things you're hoping to improve along the corridor? Here are the different responses we received from multiple different partners in that group, and it was helpful to kind of use these inputs to develop those kind of key 3 areas that are in your policy framework. So the TAC is reviewing this policy framework through next week. Really interested in continuing to meet and discuss the policy framework with your staff as we finalize it, and then we'll have a meeting later this month on the 30th to really kind of take us to the next step. Okay, so with that, we'll hop into the policy framework overview. And again, it starts with a vision, really capturing the collective outcome of what the region is seeking to achieve. And that's tied to goals and objectives that define specific actions we can take to achieve those, that vision and those goals. So we're really focused on those top 2. And then, from the finalization of the framework, we'll then move to the performance measures to really analyze the projects and make sure we're making meaningful progress toward those goals. Okay, without further ado, here is your draft vision statement. I'll pause for a moment as we all read it. We really think this vision statement, although not final, it really captures a lot of the input we received and really seeks to align with a lot of the policy goals, not in the blueprint, but also some state goals, even the EDCTC RTP, really capturing some of the key outcomes and measures that are hoped for. And then-
What is the intention of the word resilient in this particular context? Just out of curiosity, if you have an opinion on that.
Yeah, so resilient, and I think it ties to the emergency preparedness aspect. So as these extreme weather events are occurring, right? Resilience is a transportation network that can overcome that. We saw Trip to Green is a good example that EDCTC is leading, that it's not only a demand management strategy, right, to make sure that you have travel going through, but even at times of emergencies are occurring, right? It's a way that you actually are able to move the vehicles and move folks through. Is that helpful? So
Yeah,
climate
that's
resilience.
perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, we have these major draft goals and strategies. Again, I'm not going to get into all the key details. Those are included in the packet. But the key 3 top areas are improving safety for all transportation system users. It's people walking, biking as well. Enhancing travel reliability within the corridor, and increasing multimodal travel options and access to destinations. So before we go to input, this is the first committee presentation here, but we can generally come back with updates. So here are a few potential times we could come back with updates. That project list in winter might be, in 2026, later winter, and then draft and final plan in the spring, all leading to board approval in June 2026, lining us up for the next round of SB1 program, specifically Solutions for Congested Corridor. So I will stop there and really ask for further committee input and comments. We really just want to make sure we're on the right track with this policy framework. So, as it relates to the vision statement, whether the goals are following from the inputs, and whether you think anything's missing. And back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Directors, any suggestions, recommendations, ideas, thoughts, questions?
Chair, just
Yes,
a
sir.
quick question. What I've read so far makes a lot of sense and seems very broad and a great way to try to tackle what's going on the corridor. With the input that you have received, the 1,200 folks that have provided some input, does it kind of align with those things? I would assume yes, but so it's just kind of a confirmation question that's kind of what you're hearing from the public as well, is all those things are important to the general population.
Generally, I mean, we developed the survey, but yeah, when you see the survey responses, and I think, those interim responses, I haven't seen the final, right? But what you see is in a lot of the questions around what will get you to ride a bike or use transit, really, I think a lot of the goals and strategies that we have in here really key into that. The one question about what would improve your corridor travel, I think that really, some of the key areas are resonating there. There's another question about kind of satisfaction or dissatisfaction with certain areas of the transportation system, and I saw kind of a lot of good alignment, again, reviewing the interim results. So, we have those interim results, and then we really have the TAC discussions, and whether that's at the TAC meeting or a follow-up meeting. And, in the discussions that I've had about the policy framework, I've only had a few, and would love to talk to all of your staff again. It's really lining up with a lot of things that they're talking about, whether it's EDCTC, a lot of resilient is actually in their RTP as a key kind of goal. And then safety, clearly the state, Caltrans, SACOG, it's a key interest of ours. And then, the reliability is really, I think, getting at how we're going to improve the system. So yeah, in the comments we've received from the TAC, I think there's, some language in the safety area they think we should update there, and also tying it better to efficient land use, which I think also, again, will connect better to our blueprint if we did that. And then just telling the story better on congestion, right? I think that's another comment that I had received from a TAC partner. So those are the sorts of changes at this time we're ready to make those updates. But again, the TAC is reviewing this through next week, and happy to have further discussions to make sure we're moving this in the direction that the region is hoping for.
Thank you.
Directors, anything else?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Framed by CTC's guidelines, is the audience for this state funding partners, or does it include federal funding partners?
Yeah, and again, a great follow-on to our last discussion, right? So there's certainly some uncertainty in terms of the federal funding. We've looked at some of the new measures that the federal government had released in that memo a few months back. And so we can analyze those, but generally, since this process, it opens up eligibility to the state solutions program, and the guidelines are heavily aligned with state policy goals. That's really, I think, where the focus is. But a planning process opens your project up. If it's on that list, if it's prioritized, if it's competitive for, a state program, there might be a federal program out there that's similar, right? So there's a state ATP, there's also a federal ATIP, ATIIP, right? So it's not that you won't be eligible or competitive with the federal government, but we're really trying to align with the state goals on the solutions for congested and just the guidelines for CMCPs in general, if that's helpful.
So then again, to kind of tag on to what I was saying in the last item, if we looked at the draft vision statement, if you were to replace the word equitable with the word accessible, I think you say the same thing without risking the trigger word for the new administration.
Dustin, if I can, I want to
Please.
check on my accuracy on this. So the CMCP is a requirement if you want to access the SB1 funding program, that is a state program, correct?
That is correct.
Right. And so that's the main reason to do the CMCP. I think, Dustin, what you're also trying to do through this process is these projects, if we're doing the planning effort, to try to make sure that it aligns so that those projects could be eligible as well for federal funds and be able to show like, look, we're in this additional plan and we've done, and it's prioritized, right?
That is correct.
So very fair point. I agree. Accessible would definitely like
They cover the same thing.
align across all of them, but just to make sure we know that the CMCP is a creature of SB1.
Fair enough.
Okay, since I have the gavel, I get the last word here. I will just say that we almost always are developing plans and strategies, visions and so forth to align with funding programs. All of them have rules. I recognize that that is the case. In spite of that, I will say that in my personal experience, having grown up in Chicago, there are 3 main freeways that run from east to west into the city. And for large parts of their pathways, they are effectively parallel and optional to the people who live in between them. The limited access expressway that I mentioned earlier has a very large number of people that live between it and Highway 50. And it's an option for them when they're driving. It could be an option for them in multimodal ways. It's absolutely an option for anybody that's approaching Sacramento from the south that wants to turn and head east. So anybody heading to Folsom or, well, actually Elk Grove or Rancho or Folsom, Placerville, or to go ski or to go to, Maryland, they have the option of cutting the corner off and heading down the limited access expressway. So narrowly defining that corridor as being just within the 1 mile each way of the actual path of Highway 50 is not really looking at the big picture all the way. So that's me soapboxing more than anything else, but it should be something that we consider as we go forward with these developments. Okay, directors, if you have comments or updates on any other topic, now is the time. Otherwise, I will call us to close.
And for the record, there was no public comment on that last item.
Thank you very much. I wanted the last word. All right, we are adjourned. Our next meeting will be Thursday, May 15th at 1:30